Right now, I'm determining. I define success as like I get to see sunsets with my kids, and I'm still
Yeah.
doing what I love, and I'm seeing momentum. So every month there's traction. There's people signing on, things headed in the right direction, and through some of your helpful advice before, hopefully going to be accelerating that pretty soon.
Well, welcome to the podcast today. This is Jason, and I have a special guest with me today. His name is Tony Parlapiano. And Tony, that's Italian, correct, for speak softly, correct?
Yeah, Italian for speak softly. That's right.
Awesome. And so Tony has been teaching piano lessons for over 20 years, and just recently he supported his family with teaching piano lessons, so kind of that traditional path. And just recently, about a year ago, you pretty much took a bomb and blew that whole thing up and blew that house up almost. If you call it that house, it was your piano teaching, and you've got kind of a whole new method, which I think is awesome. I'm excited to have you share that story with others.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I did not really understand the risk involved when I made that move. I thought I was solving a whole bunch of problems for my clients, and in turn, I kind of created a whole bunch for myself.
Well, let's rewind back. I think to understand where you're at today, I mean, this is going to help a lot of musicians out there, I think, but let's rewind all the way back to how you kind of got started with piano and just music in general, and share a little bit about your story with us.
Sure. Well, I was a little late to piano. I grew up in a family. I was the youngest of 9 children. My siblings were all considerably older than me, but they all had played an instrument. So when I was growing up, there was a lot of instruments around the house. I went through public school band program, changing around in a few different instruments. Pretty much on right in 7th grade, we had this awesome band director. And if you had asked me on the second day of 7th grade, like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? I would have pointed at the band director and said, I want that guy's job.
Nice.
Just never seen somebody so passionate on the clock, at their job. And from that point on, music really became the focus of my life. My brother, who's 22 years older than I am, taught me how to play a little bass guitar, and I would play in his little duo. He had a guitar duo, so I'd play with them. And then I went to college, thinking I was going to become a high school band director or something in that field. And I was in a jazz improvisation class, and there was no piano player in that class. So it felt like a door opened, and I kind of walked through it, and I got really into the piano. And from that point on, I spent the following summer desperately trying to catch up to everybody who'd been playing since they were about 6.
Nice.
And convincing the head of the department that it was a good idea to let someone who just started playing piano pursue this as their career from here on out.
Nice. So did you go in to be a piano major then? You graduated in that field?
Well, it started with music education, and then when I decided that wasn't the path I wanted to go on, I started at a community college, and when I finished there, I moved to Westfield State University and finished out what's called a jazz studies program, which isn't music education. It's not as rigorous as like a performance degree. It's kind of just a general degree, music degree. I'm not even sure what I could really do with it today. And I kind of just knew from that point on, I had gotten into playing with bands. I had an opportunity to start teaching not that long after I started playing piano. But again, I had that background in music. So I knew that I kind of just wanted to get through college and not upset my parents too much. I just wanted to complete a degree. And that's kind of what ended up happening there.
Okay. Got it. And then, so you finished up the degree, and then what?
Yeah, I finished up the degree. While I was in my senior year, I was working for a local mom and pop music shop. I was kind of selling guitars and keyboards, and they opened up a new location, and I had the opportunity to be the piano teacher at that location. That's how I built up my studio initially. I was teaching a few days there. I had a few private students already, and I was teaching like 6 days a week, three days at the store, and they filled up my schedule, and then I had 3 days worth of travel teaching. That's how I started initially. So that became kind of the full-time gig. Prior to that, it was just like I was working like high school jobs, working for the local sports card and comic book shop and the video game store and things like that. So I really went from just kind of your general kid jobs to right into piano teaching. So this has really been the only profession that I've ever known.
And the piano teaching is really, I mean, that was kind of what you decided as you finished college. That's what you wanted to be in, and you got really good at that. If you were in it 20 years, you must have been a pretty good teacher.
Well, you know what happened? I was working at that local mom and pop music shop. I decided I wanted to start teaching, and I started pursuing that more full time. The shop got bought out by a bigger company, and I was approached by them to become like a store manager at one point. They were like, "We'd love to have you as a store manager. The previous owner said you were great." And at the time I was like, "Oh man, do I really want to like, buy a bunch of like quarter zip sweaters and come in every day and sell like talk band instruments and sell music?" At the time it seemed like a good offer because I was still in school and it was a decent salary, but I was really into teaching and I was starting to build my client base. And at the time I went with what felt like a more risky option, but it turns out like I felt way more secure with being self-employed and having all of these clients, knowing that, man, I might lose a couple clients, but I can gain a couple more, but I don't have like one person in control of whether I have an income or not. And so that's kind of how that happened. I was kind of faced with the choice, and once again, I kind of just went with what felt right at the time. And I just loved teaching so much. Like I said, I knew I wanted to do that from the first day in 7th grade. I just didn't know it was going to be a piano teacher. I thought I was going to be a band director. But as soon as I started playing piano, I just fell in love with it. And that's it. I built my, the next 20 years has been working with students. A lot of those students that I worked with, they were with me at least 10 years. I had incredible retention. Almost every student that started with me before the age of 10 continued at least until the day they graduated high school. And since 2011, I've been teaching online since 2011. A lot of those students, when they would graduate high school, they would continue their lessons online. So I've been teaching online way before that whole pandemic thing.
So I guess how many students or how many hours a week, I guess, were you spending teaching? Because that's a lot of lessons in order to pay the bills and support family.
I think at the peak, I had like 52 appointments on the calendar each week.
Wow.
And it was a mix of half-hour appointments, 45-minute appointments. But it was also, I was teaching students from Seattle, Washington to Sydney, Australia. So I'm working with like a 17-hour time zone, space and time zone, and I've got a very accommodating personality. So my schedule is a little all over the place.
Yeah, that's definitely, it makes things hard when you got kids or family, right?
100%. Yeah.
Wow. So you did that for about 20 years, and just recently, you had kind of some ideas. Talk a little bit about how you kind of got to the point where you decided, hey, I'm not going to teach lessons anymore in the same way.
Sure. Well, I will say that the 20-year kind of trajectory there. I started off teaching at that store, and then I was doing some travel teaching, and that became kind of my main gig, the travel teaching. And I was working with a lot of affluent families, and I was able to charge a premium for that service. So I know a lot of people who do travel teaching, they're like, "Oh, we'll upcharge it like $5 or whatever." They just for gas, and it's like, no. This is an incredible service that you're providing, and people are so happy to pay you like double to triple what the average rate is just so they don't have to leave their house. So I was able to make a pretty good living with travel teaching, and I really enjoyed that because I love driving. I love being in my car, and I just had great clients. And it was really in 2020 when I went online, that's when the traveling went away and I had all this availability in my schedule, and I also had all this experience with teaching online because I'd been doing it since 2011. Some of the local community music schools kind of dropped the ball. A lot of people were inexperienced with teaching online. So that's how my schedule got filled up to like 52 people. And it was kind of fine during that time period because everybody was home. Nobody was really canceling lessons. Nobody had sports, just piano. I had people asking for, can we take 2 piano lessons a week? Just because they had nothing else really going on. And then last year when spring sports came in and everything was opening back up, I started just getting a ton of text messages from parents needing to reschedule. Oh, we have a conflict. And I'm like, this is not fun. I just want to teach music. And feel like I'm going through all of this effort to just get an appointment on the calendar or to reschedule things. And then it was my own fault because of my accommodating personality. I made it seem very easy. Oh yeah, no problem. I'll meet with you then. Change the time. No worries. So I was never very strict with my policy once I was doing online lessons. With travel teaching, yes, that was kind of a strict, you got an appointment. If you can't make it, oh well, we'll see you next week kind of thing, because I'm only in your area once a week. But when I went online, everything kind of went relaxed. And it served me well because that last quarter, the first quarter of last year was the best quarter I'd ever had. But then things started to, I could feel the turn a little bit, and I felt the change in the economy, and I felt the inflation, and I was like, hey, I just went out with my kids and with some friends, and it was like the night was on me, and I was, at the end of the night, I was like, man, I almost spent $300 to entertain my family and some friends for something that probably would have been like $150 a few years ago. So I was like, I don't want to go back to, I didn't want to go into like, let me just go back to tightening my policy, I'll raise my rates again. And it's like over and over for 20 years, that's how I've always dealt with inflation and things like that, is just, okay, I guess I'll raise my rates a little bit. But I was kind of tired of that. So that's when I came up with this new model, which, as I mentioned, I thought was going to be solving a lot of problems, because rather than having individual private lessons and meeting with people individually, I created a schedule of live classes. And the idea was to charge people one fee, and for that fee, they could attend as many live classes as they wished. And it would be very easy to reschedule themselves. Hey, you got a soccer game on Thursday? Don't worry about it. I got classes on Friday. Just come Friday. You don't have to even tell me about it. Just here's the schedule. Come when you can, kind of thing. And so that's kind of how that idea was born, because I was tired of not seeing sunsets with my kids, and I just wanted to go from having all these individual private lessons to a schedule of opportunities, and just say, okay, everybody's welcome. And of course, it was set up with leveled and tiered and things like that. But the vision was very clear in my mind at the time, but it also wasn't really visible to my clients. I didn't have a website up there where they could see the vision, and I think I confused a lot of them in the process.
Interesting. So you ended up, as you switched over to that model, my guess is you had a lot of these people that were used to the one-on-one, and the new model wasn't necessarily tailoring to that, and so they probably weren't your ideal client anymore at all then, right?
That's part of it. Yeah. They definitely were used to their one-on-one time and being in a class with other students. Some of them were very shy to talk, and I love this idea of community and bringing people together and sharing learning experiences and doing things together. And I was pairing this at the time with a whole online community. So in addition to the live classes, we had this online community where they could talk, and we could have recorded classes for them to check out. But yeah, it was definitely a big shift. And my intention was never to entirely replace private lessons, but to give them this as like my half of the circle. This is the education that I think everybody needs. And then if you want, you can still schedule a private lesson, but you probably won't need one every single week, so that they could supplement with private lessons for their own individual interests and projects. Yeah. And still incorporating those in the group program. But that was kind of the idea that I had when I first started it.
And my guess is, I mean, where you came from, kind of that jazz background, you were probably more into the lead sheets and chords, and unlike the traditional, when you're 6 years old, you start learning to read classical music. My guess is your approach is probably very different than your traditional, very regimented, you got to play Beethoven, and, you have to follow this path.
Right, and that's why it works. Because when I tell people about this, they're like, "How do you make that work? You got students at all different levels." But when you have a truly creative approach, it's hard to say that now because everybody takes that word. Everybody thinks everything that they're doing is super creative, but this is really original. And I tell people, I say, if you haven't heard it from me, you haven't heard it before. This is a unique presentation, but there's nothing strange or weird here. These are all observations I've made over the last 20 years. And it's such an organic process. And if you've ever met a musician who is self-taught and they're just incredible at what they do and they can just play music, it's like, it's easy to play as it is to listen to. They hear it, they can play it. But a lot of those musicians will tell you like, I don't read music and I don't understand theory and all that. And it's not that they don't understand it. They just don't understand the standard language, or they don't read the standard notation. They don't have all the proper vocabulary, but they've all learned through listening. That's how it happens. And they all, if you talk to them, they have a very detailed way of how they find the sounds that they're looking for on the instrument. And so what I do is I try to preserve that organic process, but at the same time put it into a structure where they could thrive in any environment. So I have the background in jazz. I have a little bit in the traditional, and I have friends that I talk with all the time. And I also am very focused on this like pop rock styles of music, which requires a different framework. The way that chords and things behave in pop styles of music is very different from how they behave in classical or in jazz. So I'm able to move between those three different types of frameworks. But yeah, it's very much creativity and improvisation. That's a huge focus of what we do. The other one is learning by listening. So when you hear something on the radio, you know what it is. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't need a chord chart. That's what a lot of people think. They say, well, let's go get a chord chart. I'm like, that's like looking up the answers in the back of the book. You have just lost the discovery process. That's a cool skill to have, and you want it, but it's still interference. It's not that much different than decoding sheet music. It's a little bit because you're actually accessing your mind and your brain, and you have to know stuff to be able to do it. But at the same time, it can be somewhat, I don't want to say limiting, but if you're not doing the creativity and improvisation and really approaching the piano through exploration and discovery and making your own connections, it's hard to find your own sound.
Right. Well, I see, I came up that classical route where you played sheet music. And I remember for years and years growing up that if you took my sheet music away in high school, I had the opportunity to help out one time with the jazz band. And I had to have that sheet music of, I'm going to play this thing. And if you tried to take that away from me, I mean, I was lost. I mean, it just complete shut down. But it was partly because I felt like I couldn't do it without the music, because I didn't know it was even possible. And it was, nobody had ever explained to me what a fake book was or record sheets. The YouTube didn't really exist to even get the colored notes to find your way, right? I tell my kids, I'm like, yeah, we use those big, even in high school, nobody had cell phones. It was right as I was graduating when cell phones came around. So good times, but definitely there's some faster ways, I think, and easier paths that I could have gone down with my music that would have made, I'd be a much better musician, I think, had I known about those tools and believed that I could go without a sheet music in front of me.
Well, a lot of teachers don't have that skill themselves, so it's hard for them to pass it on.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate outcome for somebody who only accesses music from the outside. If they always rely on something external, they need instructions to be able to produce music. That it's not, you got to approach it from the inside out. Yep. And so it's I understand, and it's sad to me because I see it's kind of unique a little bit to piano lessons. I see people who study guitar who have taken 6 months, a year's worth of guitar lessons, and 20 years later, they're like, hey man, I play a little guitar. They know their chords. They can sit down and jam, look at a little chord sheet, and they remember those shapes and how to play. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way that those lessons are generally, the structure of those lessons. Usually you're sat across from your teacher, you're both holding an instrument, you're playing together at the same time. And a lot of times you're not entirely focused on a book. You don't have your head buried in a map the whole time. So with piano, I've just seen so many adults who say, well, I used to play piano. Well, why'd you used to play piano? Well, I played for a long time, but guess what? The day they take piano lessons for 10 years and the day they stop taking lessons is the day they stop playing piano.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad. It's really sad because it doesn't take that long. And it's just a different approach that needs to be included, not replace. I'm not talking about replacing sheet music. I think the standard notation exists for a very good reason. But when I show up to a rehearsal with all my friends, we all show up with our songbooks. And if you looked at all of our notes, we all have our own way of writing down what we need to know to play the songs. Oh, we're going into the studio. We all have our own notes. And what does that mean? You got to talk to each other to figure it out. But that's why standard notation exists. So if you learn standard notation or a way to standardize a chord chart or a chord symbol, well, now, if we all agree to that standard, then we can convert our crazy little notes and charts into something that everyone can understand. So understand that when I'm saying this, although my focus is on creativity, improvisation, learning by listening, understanding, reading is also very important to me, but I approach it through writing. So we're going to learn how to write. If you can learn how to write, you'll know how to read.
Interesting. So I mean, if you tell, I'm sure you have several stories of people that have been successful. I guess as you've done this for 20 plus years now, and now you're offering these kind of group lessons where people can pop in anytime, they're live, so it's still the same, but you've got other people in there. What would you say is the biggest difference and feedback that you get from students that are attending? Are they saying that they're learning faster? Is it they appreciate being able to hear different people and learn from their mistakes? With the structure you're doing, what would you say is working and not working, maybe?
I really think all of it's working now. And there were a lot of things that were not working that have been fixed. So I'm going to look back on this first year and have a good story about, man, that first year was a circus, it was filled with learning experiences, but there's nobody out there that's doing a program like this. So I really only had the opportunity to learn from my own mistakes. And still learning and improving. But the good news is that the conversations have changed, and where students used to say, I'm confused, I don't get it. Now people are like, I can't believe how much opportunity I have here at such an accessible rate, which is exactly what I wanted when I created this. I see teachers around there bragging about how much they can charge for a private lesson. I charge $200. And to me, I was just like, that's cool. But I really wanted to go the other direction. I wanted people to be like, I can't believe how much I can offer somebody at such an accessible rate, and to be able to serve a lot of people. So what I see is we have people using the program very differently. Some people really love our live classes. We have 50 live classes, and they attend, no joke, I have people that attend like 10 to 14 classes every week. I mean, it's like they are immersed in a college experience. And it's like going to a new country. They're just immersing themselves in this language, and they're just seeing the benefits from it. And so you can't not get a whole lot better by putting in that much effort, right? But we have other people in the program that they hardly ever come to our live classes. They work off all our recorded content. So we have a lot of recorded material, and they work through those. We have about at least 5 classes that get recorded every week. And then there's a lot of conversations happening on Discord. But the big thing where people are seeing the most progress is in how I really tell them what's helped me the most. Because I'm not a person who's spent my whole life like spending hours a day in a practice room. I don't sit around playing things in all 12 keys and practicing what other people tell me to do. The whole point of learning by listening is that you can be learning all the time whenever you're listening to music. The improvements don't only occur when you're sitting at your instrument, when you're trying to read sheet music, when you're physically doing exercises on the piano. It happens all the time when you're listening and making connections. So I go for a walk, I listen to a song, I come home and I play it. because I've been listening to it. And I play every day. And it's not a lot, but I play every day. And I record myself every day. And that's what I encourage my students to do. Everyone on our server has a private locker where they can submit recordings. And we try to get them excited about the idea of producing what I call a campfire-inspired recording every day. Campfire is the way we introduce creativity and improvisation. We have it's called a campfire challenge that we put them through. And the whole idea is that they produce daily recordings. You make the instrument part of the rhythm of your life. It's not something that you just go to occasionally. It's like you make the time, you carve the time out to do it. And so when they do that daily, they immediately see the benefits.
Yeah.
And when they know that they can share it with others, and I'm out there sharing my recordings on the server, I think they're all benefiting in different ways, in their own ways. They're all finding their way to kind of utilize the program. And it's very flexible because it's one price and they get all those live classes, they get the online community, and they get the live classes. So they can choose how they want to extract the value.
Yeah. Well, if you could rewind the clock back, let's say 20 years, and you could be in front of a class of let's say yourself was there, and you got other kids there, especially other people who are thinking, maybe I want to do music, maybe I don't. And they may have had parents that said, hey, you can't make a living with music, so you need to go be an attorney or a doctor or whatever. What advice would you have for that group in that room?
It's a great question. And the good news is, at least for myself, is I don't have any regrets about the path that I've taken. But I probably would have liked the advice that you were offering me before we started this call, which you were telling me about some great books and things that have served you really well. I guess I had taken a little bit more interest in optimizing my business. I really love every part of the path that has brought me to where I am. But it's been challenging because as a musician, you often lead a very complicated life. It's very challenging to make your living doing just one thing. A lot of musicians they'll play, they'll teach a little, there's a lot of different ways musicians make money. For me, teaching has always been at least 80% of it. But I'll say that I wish I had gotten a little bit more education around business and how to set up things to just streamline that, because I feel like I could have had a lot more time with my children if I had done that, if I had been better at setting boundaries, But at the end, I count it all joy because I'm really here. And even now, where this last year has been very challenging, it's really put a lot of things into perspective for me. And I used to kind of think about success as, well, did I earn more income this month than I earned last month? And when I got to that point last year where the first quarter was the best quarter I'd ever had, I was like, the income feels good, but I don't want to work this hard to get it. And so I guess I'm glad I learned that lesson now. I wish I had learned it at least 10 years earlier, because that's when my children were born. And I feel like I missed out on opportunities to spend with them in that time. But I don't know that there's been any real total blunders where I'm like, man, I really screwed that up.
Yeah. Well, you talked about measuring success. So if you were, the name of the podcast is Successful Musician, and I find it fascinating how that definition is different almost for every single person, So I'm just curious, when you hear successful musician, what does that mean to you?
Can you make a living doing what you love? And on your own terms, not feeling that your clients own you. I know a lot of people in this profession feel like they're scared to lose a client. They will accommodate way beyond what is reasonable. They will work 7 days a week. They'll try to take on 70 students. They'll compromise everything just to avoid having to have a 9-to-5 job. And there's that, what's that joke of, as an entrepreneur, you get to pick any 16 hours a day that you want to work or whatever. So for me, I'm on the eternal quest for balance. And I just want to be able to support my family, doing what I love. But the most important part for me is being there for my children. And that's really what this whole venture has been. And it's taught me. And now I'm okay because now I've solved all of the things that were troubling me before. And the only thing left I have to figure out is the income portion. And I've got the structure built in, and I've been up for the challenge, the learning experience. And in March we signed on 10 new students, signed on another one just before this call. So it's nice to see the wheels in motion, and it's coming ahead. And I think now that I'm talking through this a little bit, understanding the risk, you might not always see it at the beginning, but if you have a really great idea or something and you're just worried about how your clients are going to respond to it, over my 20 years in teaching, there's been probably 3 or 4 different decisions that I've had to make, changes that I've made where I've lost nights of sleep thinking about it, worrying like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to lose half my clients. The funny thing is this was the only move that I ever made that I didn't think that was going to happen. Every other one that I worried about was fine, really fine. You want to raise your rates? Cool. Cancellation policy? Fine. Nobody cared about any of that stuff. And then here I was like, oh, everybody's going to love this. And then I realized, no, they missed their private lessons with Tony. So talk with others, learn, but I don't know. As for me, right now I'm determining, I define success as like I get to see sunsets with my kids. And I'm still doing what I love, and I'm seeing momentum. So every month there's traction, there's people signing on, things headed in the right direction, and through some of your helpful advice before, hopefully going to be accelerating that pretty soon.
But it's interesting as I've talked to dozens and dozens of people about what this success is. I think sometimes in our minds we think, okay, I'm going to set that goal, and I'm going to, when you achieve that goal, a lot of times you hit it and you're like, yes, I did it, and maybe you last all of 5 to 10 minutes, and then now what, right? And I think, honestly, what a lot of us are actually probably, all of us should shoot for is, how do you find that fulfillment? And, that taking time to watch, enjoy the sunset with your kids, those things that actually matter most, versus maybe a plaque or something that's on the wall. It feels really good when you got it, but the fulfillment, it doesn't come from that, medal or award or trophy that you win. And I think one of the things that I've seen over and over again kind of bubble to the surface is you have this, when you can reach a point where you're serving others, that's where a lot of the fulfillment tends to come. So I think there's definitely, as people are trying to, you talked about the money goal. I think that the more you can serve and give, it'll give you that fulfillment. And you, just like you were saying, it wasn't really for the money. It was cool that you made, you had your best month ever, but it was more about helping more and more people where you were finding that happiness and fulfillment from. And I think in watching that growth and contribution, or seem to be one of the only paths I've seen, at least in my career, in my life, in order to really get to that fulfillment level, is a lot of times you've got to go through something really difficult where you grow. And it like you were talking about, it was uncomfortable. But in doing that super uncomfortable thing, the growth that you had was, 100 times more than had you just continued on what you'd been doing for the last 20 years. You were having some success and fulfillment, but the growth that you've had over the last year, I'll bet you feel like you've grown more in 1 year than maybe in the last 20, with all of the things you've had, right?
100%. And I'll also say, as you were saying that, I think for many teachers, one of the best forms of currency is appreciation. And I didn't really feel like I had that a year ago when I was teaching individual private lessons. And now in a program that requires students be a bit self-directed, led by their interests, and they really understand the intention behind what I'm doing. Every day I get notes of appreciation. Yeah. And that for me, I think for any teacher, just seeing their progress, hearing them be proud of what they're doing, it's like that's going to snowball. Yeah. It's just going to keep getting better and better.
Well, and I think if you look at just the teaching profession, whether it's piano or even just like a teacher in school, I think a lot of what motivates that teacher in most of these individuals is they want to make a contribution. They want to give back. And I think they find that fulfillment in contributing. And I think it'll suck the life out of you if you don't feel appreciated. I think that's one of the biggest reasons. One, salaries obviously need to be good, but I don't think the money's why any teacher went into their profession. It's they wanted to contribute to society or make a change or for the better, because probably somebody did that for them. And I think really, if you think about it, that growth and contribution, when you grow, like a good human being always wants to give back and serve and contribute. And that's really, I think, the path to that fulfillment on this journey that we think we're on this journey to, make enough money to pay for the house and the kids and all that. But it doesn't really matter unless you can feel that, the success, I think, is in the fulfillment. It's very rare, though, that I think that framework or roadmap sometimes hits us when we're in our 20s and 30s. And I think a lot of times you got to be that old wise sage up on the hill before you look back and you're like, that's what it was,
Right.
And hopefully those younger, if you're some 20-something person sitting in a class like you and I both were years ago, hopefully this fast tracks for those individuals to, take the challenge to grow. And don't be afraid to take that risk and grow yourself, because that's the fast track to being really happy and fulfilled, I think. So
can't improve on that, man. You said it.
So anyway, I know we're out of time here, Tony, but if people want to check out what you're doing, I've looked at your site. It keeps changing in a great way. If they're interested in learning more about, what it's your system you're doing, or want to even take lessons or whatever, where should they go to find that?
Yeah, so the website is popMATICS.com. And yeah, we're making a few improvements, but it's pretty well dialed in. And we're making a few improvements over the next few days, but everything's there that you need to see and ways to contact us. So popMATICS.com, that's the place.
Awesome. And then we'll have that link in the show notes as well. So if you're listening to this podcast, it'll be easy to come back in, scroll down, and you'll be able to find that link as well. So Tony, thank you so much. We need to absolutely do this again. This was a really fun interview. I appreciate you. I've learned a lot in just hearing your story, and I always learn a lot about myself in talking with great people. So thank you.
Likewise, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.